We are in between two kind of events. So yesterday was the 1st of January, where we all make New Year resolutions. I made some comments about this at an event yesterday, and I may repeat some of them. So yesterday, 1st of January, is also Kalpatru Day, where the great Paramahansa Ramakrishna reveals his light. He reveals it to some 30 devotees, but then through them and through the recording of the event, it arrives all over the world to understand what this event is. But the interesting title of that event is called Kalpatru. That means a wish-fulfilling tree. Of course, Ramakrishna himself tells us a story around that. And the subject of tonight will be divine grace. And it's appropriate to the subject because tomorrow will be the birthday of Sharada Devi, the consort and wife of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, it's not often we talk about these people. Our message is Vedanta, but if we really want to understand Vedanta, then we really have to take the outstanding ideals and personalities through which this philosophy practically shines, and to benefit from the grace which they exude, and that manifests itself for thousands upon thousands of years. Once Swami Vivekananda asked Ramakrishna, you see, I don't know if we can have any real veracity around the historicity of Jesus or Buddha or Rama or Krishna. The only people that we know who really existed historically would be Buddha and Muhammad. Now you see, Ramakrishna's reply was, it doesn't really matter. I'm summarizing. Something existed to last for 2,000 years, 2,500 years, 5,000 years, 7,000 years. Some remarkable thing must have been there that dispensed its impact across the whole universe for these years, so that we still have the tales, the stories, and the teachings of those great personalities that act as a shining example. Just like when you switch a light on, the rays don't just go to the first few inches around the light. The rays go much broader than that. They can light a whole room. And grace is dispensed on us. What do we mean by grace? The inner urge toward our goal of perfection. And we are issued with this not all at once. If I go in a car from here to Belfast, no point in giving me a light that shines all the way to Belfast. All I require is a few meters. And after that, another few meters. I get what I require. This is for economic reasons, in order to avoid confusion. If I get it all at once, then I cannot cope with it. If all the grace in the world comes to me as a kind of sense of illumination or enlightenment, it will have such a devastating impact on me. I can only take what I can cope with. I have a mechanism that is designed for a limited view. And so I have to acknowledge what I have and then use it. Now I can also misuse it. What we call grace is a form of energy that arrives at my local substation called me and gets either used to overall benefit or gets wasted to my detriment. Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter tells us very clearly this. It's up to us entirely. Now you see, we have a Pelagian controversy that goes back to like the 4th century. You may have heard of it. In the early days of Christianity, something was being formed. There was a confusion about how Christianity should look and how its rules and doctrines and dogmas should be shaped for the benefit of spiritual life. So the idea was that there was some original sin from which we were suffering, and that restricts to some extent our level of freedom. We have to be saved from unfortunate circumstances. In other words, we start off with a minus, some deficit that has to be filled in and improved. And so this doctrine was contested, excuse me, by an alternative, a man called Pelagian, who was actually English, but we'll forgive him for that. But here's the thing. He said, no, there's no such thing. This Pelagian controversy told us that there was a theological position that was opposite to the doctrine of original sin. That this original sin is incomprehensible, it's unreasonable, and it doesn't taint human nature. And humans, by divine grace, have free will, an option to choose. And we have this to achieve perfection. Now, Pelagius was about 355 to 420. He was an ascetic, he was a philosopher. And as I say, he came from the British Isles. But he taught that God could not command believers to do the impossible. And therefore, it must be possible to satisfy all the divine commandments. I'm looking for a different term, because commandments means we have no choice in itself, contradiction in terms. But when we say commandments, we mean the obvious moral objectives that we have. And so he also taught that it was unjust to punish one person for the sins of somebody else. Today, we have another controversy similar to that, because we have people who are quite happy to state that the demise of the sorry, let me just take this away. That's okay. That the demise of the certain ethnic races, such as the Native Indian Americans, Native American Indians, that the slavery issue that arises in, let's say, United States of America, all of that has its inheritance down the line, and we should pay vast sums of money to those people whose ancestors were enslaved maybe 200 years ago. It doesn't seem very fair. What have you or I got to do with any of our ancestors who, say, came to Ireland and were planters, establishing plantations, because over the seas from Scotland, very short trip, and let's say Queen Elizabeth or King James was the person who gave the opportunity for open land in the country and people looking for a new life and making a kind of deal with certain influential people with this one provision: they should make a stronghold or a castle to subdue the population. Naturally, people took advantage of it. Should our ancestors pay for their crime? And the answer is not reasonably so. And so it is the same as this doctrine. And Pelagius was keen enough to combat it. And it was a heresy, or declared as a heresy, namely by St. Augustine and others. But today, we don't see it as a heresy. Today, we see it as a reasonable position. And I don't think there's any theological controversy over it. Now we can say, instead of there being a starting point where there's a deficit, why don't we say a starting point has absolute fullness within it? There is nothing to gain any further. It is simply that in front of the perfection, there are a number of difficult obstacles. And these obstacles are defined by life itself, or what we call nature itself. And they are obstacles. That means that we have the capacity to identify them and get around them. It is not a hopeless situation. It is a situation where We have to use our inherent skills and talents. And these skills and talents arrive through divine grace itself. They are evidence that there is some supreme intelligent being that gives us free of charge a flow of grace that is useful to us and to others. And just like any adapter, we are instrumental in its flow. What do I mean by this? Philosophically, we call these upadis. Limiting adjuncts is how it's normally interpreted. But actually, they are manifesting agents. We have an example of that, yes. An electrical current flows. Let us say the grace of electricity is always flowing. It's flowing by the grace of the electromagnetic wave system, containing many, many different variations of waves, some of which we can catch and harness, some of which are beyond the scope of our instruments. Infrared, ultraviolet, supersonic. Beyond our normal range, we have X-rays, for example. So the whole lot of systems are there, and we only have instrumentation to catch a few. Is that convenient? Yes. If we were able to catch the whole lot, we'd be inundated with confusion. We're only given enough. We're only giving it enough to light up the next few yards, and then the next few yards, and then the next few yards. But we should make that directional. We shouldn't deviate. Using the expression or the example of going to Belfast, we should not deviate across the mountains and get lost. And then blame the map, or blame the countryside, or blame the Protestants, or whatever it is. So it's very easy to blame another. We do it, of course, with God. When things are running smoothly, everything is fine, we forget about God. But when difficulties arise, then, oh, why me? Looking up to the heavens somehow. A kind of primitive form of understanding of what this divinity is. What is this divinity? It is a flow of divine grace. There's a passage in the Kathopanishad, which is very interesting and very useful. It tells us, Nayam Atma Pravachane na labhyo na medaya na bahuna shrutena yame vaisha vrute tena labhyas tasyasya atma virnute tanum swam. This, what? Whenever we say this, we mean Atma. This Nayam Atma, this self, cannot be attained by instruction. It cannot be attained by talks. It cannot be attained by these lecture series. Then it cannot be attained by your own reasoning or your own intellectual power. The self can be attained neither through sermons and teachings, instructions, none of this, nor by your own intellectual power. You cannot reason it out, because this Atman is way beyond reasoning. Reasoning is its instrument, and we should use it, but we won't get it. We'll only get an indication of it. And at best, it's an abstract indication. Somebody asked me once, so tell me, how will I know when I understand the truth? Or how will I know when I see this transcendent being, this God? Well, it's an irrelevant question. So I said, so have you, and I was talking to a child, by the way, who asked a very adult question. Child was about 9 years old. It happened yesterday morning. Then I said, have you ever traveled in an airplane? Oh, yes, I've been on a holiday. All right. Well, how do you know when you're flying? Well, you look out of the window, you see the clouds, you see the land below, you feel the surge when it goes up, and you know when it's landing. You catch the brakes, And if you're German, you clap when it lands and so on. All of these things happen. So that's when you know you're in the aircraft. It's self-evident. Similarly, when we take a transcendent flight, we will know it. This is what knowledge means. Knowledge means we don't have to repeat anything. It's well known. All of us know our names, presumably. But you don't have to write it down every day. When you write your signature, you're not exhausting your knowledge of who you are. You don't have to repeat over and over again, my name is this, my name is this. So knowledge means I don't have to repeat it again. It's concluded. But what is lack of knowledge? Lack of knowledge is when I have to repeat over and over again, and it's also the technique. When you repeat it over and over again until it sinks in and becomes habitual, this is what we call knowledge in any sense. Whether it's knowledge about some external thing divided like that, or an internal thing, or whether it's knowledge of the transcendent. You cannot get it through intellectual power. You can't get it through much hearing. Ramakrishna gives a wonderful example. Some people have heard about milk, some people have seen milk, but others have tasted the milk. He is to be attained only by the one whom this self chooses. Now, when we say Atman in this context, we surely mean a personal God. We surely mean this Atman as presented, as manifested, as it were, as formed as a personal God, dispensing grace. It is only through this grace that we get it. Is it only through that? Well, we have to resort to Ramakrishna's beautiful analogy. The wind of divine grace is always blowing. We have but to set our sail. And I often say, is that easy? Anybody who's done any sailing will know you can easily get the ropes in a big mess, in a big tangle. You have to raise the mast up. But one thing's sure, it's not a tough job compared to the actual movement of the wind. The movement of the wind is easy to the wind. It's not easy for you. You can huff and puff on the sail as much as you like, it won't move an inch. And all you have to do is set the sail. That means open up the canvas, and even if you're on land, the wind wants to take it. You must have noticed. And so this is always blowing, but our job is comparatively easy. And yet, from our point of view, we have to learn how to do it. And that's another way of saying we have to learn how to shift our attention, which shifts anyway naturally. What do we mean by that? Well, if there's an accident, for example, outside the building and the big crash, everybody goes outside. In other words, no matter how interesting or otherwise this talk is, you'll always run to the window out of curiosity. And what happened out there? We had one incident long back when we were constructing this place, and some people decided to visit us at the window. And naturally, or not, whatever it was, curiosity, my talk wasn't interesting enough. Everybody dived for the window to investigate, who is this? And so a peculiar and funny scene occurred with people peeping out one way and other people peeping out the other way, people peeping at each other. Our attention is very easily distracted. From childhood, is very easily distracted, and to our benefit. We can deviate our attention from unpleasant things, no doubt. So it happens naturally, but it takes great skill to do it consciously, deliberately, in a structured way. And that attention becomes a revealer. It becomes a mechanism where we access divine grace. So he is to be attained only by the one whom the self chooses. To such a one, the self reveals his own nature. The actual revelation of it comes through grace. It is what is chosen. It is the grace which is on standby, as it were. And then we have to access it. The Supreme Self is difficult to know. It's unknowable by the unaided intellect. But he is knowable through his own self-revelation to the person he chooses. And every religion has a version of this divine grace. Christianity relies on it in the person of a crucified Christ and a subsequent resurrection. The self-sacrifice, the crucifying, represents one key factor, and that is renunciation. The preparedness to give up the body, give up the psychophysical completely, surrender completely. After all, if you're in a position like this, as Jesus was on the cross, you have no option to go anywhere. And so you surrender. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means voluntarily dropping any of this attachment. And then grace flows. And then we have the Easter story that follows. It comes next in March sometime for us. So God's grace is there. Prayer accesses it. Repetition of a mantra accesses it. Ritual with meaning, meaningful ritual accesses it. Offering all our activities to God accesses it. In short, tuning our attention into the divine accesses it. Just as a broadcast is there from a central radio station, and we as a kind of transistor have the capacity to tune into it. And also notice whenever it goes off the wavelength, whenever it goes out of the bandwidth, we can notice it and shift it back. We can say the wind of the electrical current, the grace of electricity is always flowing. And there are adapters. The adapter for the electricity to provide light is called the light bulb. Now, the adapter that provides the light to the earth is called the sun. And the adapter that reflects it is called the moon. And the adapter that we see in a forest is called a tree. And the adapter that we call in the human body is called the limbs. These are all adapters. They are restricting, as it were, this eternal infinite flow of energy that we call grace on the one side. But actually it's manifesting also. And if we notice the manifestation, this is our tuning mechanism. Notice it everywhere. So in the earlier meditation, we did it. We gave some various examples, as wide as possible. The obvious example of a flow is air. We mentioned that as an analogy, but also water. Water flows. Now the beauty of taking water as the analogy for God's grace is that it always takes the easiest route. No matter how you try to restrict water, it always finds a way around. Now, what is evolution? Evolution is potential grace that is gradually unfolding. It unfolds as species. It unfolds as the instrumentation that species have. And what we call species acts as an obstacle for the full expression of this manifestation. Now, when we say that see God in everyone, see God in all things, and then you say, well, even an evil person, supposing you decide, you've declared a person is evil. Holy Mother, who we'll talk about tomorrow, will say, if you want peace of mind, then don't find fault with others, rather find your own faults. Don't criticize, don't blame, only love. And make every stranger your home, or make them feel at home, make the whole world your own. This is the language that the Divine Mother, Holy Mother, uses. Well, what does that mean? It means we have to reassess our so-called normal reactions to all these scenes and events, and we have to readjust them. And you may say, well, an evil person is surely difficult to see God in there. And surely it's easier to see God in a kitten than in a spider for some people. Well, it's only that you're looking at the adapter. The adapter is different, and the adapter has the capacity to restrict the full manifestation, which comes out as man enlightened, comes out as partially as man itself, comes out more in the holy person than in the one who has chosen to direct their energy against humanity or an evil way or towards selfishness. And in that case, of course, the adapter itself is the same, but the use of it is different. How we tune in our attention is entirely up to us. And that is why we can raise ourselves by ourselves or lower ourselves by ourselves, according to the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We are our own best friend or our own worst enemy. I often quote this text. So, God's grace can take us to the highest level that contemplation and meditation has to offer. And we can scale it in 7 levels, if you will, in mystic terminology, in mystic concept. Each one unveiling and revealing more and more through the energy of divine grace. Coiled up, we call it kundalini, kundali. It's the thing that is coiled. Put as a feminine energy, we call it kundalini, put it in the feminine. That has the capacity to unfold bit by bit. Nature is doing it for us. Nature's grace is providing us with all the necessary equipment, all the necessary tools, all the necessary resources. The old example I give, how many people does it take to make a cake? Thousands, and then you go beyond that, the whole universe has done it. The whole universe has conspired to do this. From the stardust that is formed, to that which forms the stardust, to that which forms hydrogen, to the electrical energy that is there. And that electrical energy comes from a single vibration according to our mystical geography. And it starts off with a single vibration, powerful enough to disperse itself and manifest itself everywhere. And that means, therefore, that we have access to a Kalpatru, a wish-fulfilling tree. Now there's that story, I'm sure familiar to all of you, but I'll tell it again anyway for completeness sake. So a man travels on a long distance and is very tired and sees a shady tree and decides to settle under it. Doesn't know that it is a wish-fulfilling tree. Anybody who sits under its shade, whatever thought comes to their mind, the thought gets fulfilled. And we may say and judge a person by their actions, but we should really assess a person and assess your own development, if you will, by your thought, because thought precedes action. Now, he sits there under the tree. Naturally, he is tired, but with tiredness comes hunger. He thinks in a wish-fulfilling way, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be amazing if I could have all the food I would like to satisfy my hunger and my thirst, but not just the food. I'm thinking as I sit here of the most delicious food, and as I'm doing that, salivating. And as I do that, immediately a kind of picnic tablecloth appears with all the delicacies that I ever imagined. And there I feast. I'm putting the I as the traveler. Having satisfied all my hunger and thirst, naturally, after eating so much, after traveling such a long way, the traveler wants to rest. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a nice, comfortable bed and I could sit there and relax for a while? Immediately a bed appears and the traveler sits. Then he says, in his own mind, Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was somebody to massage my feet nicely, that my feet are so tired? Immediately, somebody is there massaging the feet. Now, all of this happened so rapidly, you didn't have time to examine how did this all happen. Then he wonders, what a marvelous thing this is, what a miracle this is. I can't believe it. And I really hope that a ferocious tiger doesn't come and spoil the whole thing. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. So the point is, we are continuously thinking, and the mechanism that nature has for us is this. Every aspect of this life is a variation of a cosmic mind, a cosmic thought, a divine storehouse. And every time we make a movement, which we call a resolve, an intention, and sustain it, it condenses for us as a person or place or event or scene of some kind. How long it takes, forget about it. Sometimes it happens very soon. A person skilled at tuning in to the divine, a lover of God, somebody who is constantly at one. In other words, in Jesus' prayer, thy will be done on this earth as it is in heaven. Talk about a withinness. In other words, my will, my individual will, aligned to the cosmic will. Then the manifestation happens very quickly. And people go to that person and ask for a manifestation. They don't put it like that. They say, please pray for me. All right. Then put it as already accomplished. Give your assurance, it'll happen. It happens. Some special magic power? No. An understanding that it's all part of the cosmic mind. Something remarkable happens. Somebody tells me about it. My only remark is, cosmic mind. And it manifests very quickly. This is our wish-fulfilling tree. Now, on the 1st of January, I think the Advent is mislabeled as Kalpatru or wish-fulfilling. And Swami Purnananda, who writes the biography of Ramakrishna, points this out and raises this question, was it really wish-fulfilling? On this basis, whatever we wish for very often is foolish and is ultimately painful for us. If you ask a child, do you like ice cream? Yes. If you ask them, do you like a ton of ice cream? They may say yes, thinking abstractly that they're in a kind of heaven. But I can assure you, after a few mouthfuls, they're completely finished with this ice cream. Any more of it, they'll feel a little queasy in the stomach. And so it's not so much that as a manifestation of divine grace that flowed freely to everyone, where Ramakrishna, suffering from throat cancer, from 3 causes. One cause is incessant, selfless teaching, talking. His incessant samadhi that brought blood flow to his chest and above, agitating it. And thirdly, like any selfless person, completely selfless person, what is the light of the world? That kind of ideal, taking on the effects of everybody's behavior. In theological language, we say taking on the sins of the other. The Guru does it. Otherwise, how can the Guru say, I love you, but keep your troubles to yourself? No, I love you, I'll take them on because, this is a life. I can sacrifice at least one life for you. All right. So you see, such a person was Ramakrishna, which means on that day, he, sensitive to people touching him, increasing his suffering, he voluntarily goes and touches other people, touches their chest, spreads his light everywhere, having the effect of transforming everyone present, changing their life forever. And yes, if they're devotees with this idea in mind, I don't want wealth, I don't want this, I want spiritual enlightenment. I want spiritual freedom, yes, then that wish would be fulfilled, no doubt. So it is this manifestation of divine grace, and if we have an eye to catch it, then we will definitely see it everywhere. We can view, therefore, this cosmic mind like a kind of broadcasting area, a kind of RTE in Irish terms, and those who are not from Ireland will have some different understanding. Maybe it is Portuguese broadcasting company, or maybe it is the French broadcasting company, whatever it is. But whatever that is invisible to the user of the transistor. The local radio operator will not be aware of the waves carrying through the air, microwaves, which we rely on for our normal cellular phone use. We're reliant on radio waves. Can you see radio waves? No. Can you see the effects of them being a carrier of sound? Oh, yes. And look at the complexity of it. It requires a broadcast, and the receiver will catch the broadcast identically. And it's no good saying, when the broadcast finishes, where does it go to? What is its afterlife? No, it is continuously there. And so this unity takes away the whole understanding of this life or an afterlife, and only asks us, please tune in to this divine grace. Fill yourself with it and have the eye to catch it everywhere and elevate the mind. The Mundaka Upanishad tells us it's as existing in the heart of everyone, not of one person alone, is my commentary. It destroys here, with this very body, in this human life, the knot of ignorance. The knot of ignorance is the tendencies and impressions created by ignorance that are hard to untie and undo. Just like a knot. And the word for this knot and the rope that is knotted is called guna. We have to take stock of these three, we can say qualities or substances, if you will, because you can't have a quality without a substance, and divide them into three categories. And from the purpose of our thinking, we divide them into our thinking and feeling. We can divide them into things which elevate the mind to a joyful state by virtue of its permanency, a state of joy, which has no selfish component within it, something completely free from pain, something that is illuminating, something that is ennoble. The Veda says, you see, Rig Veda, may noble thoughts come to us from all sides is the prayer. And the one prayer, starting spiritual practice, let's say, in the morning or the evening, may noble thoughts come to me from all directions, from all sides. Make me like a vessel that gets filled up by these noble values. Let it not be displaced by anything that causes myself or others pain. Sometimes our actions, often, most likely our actions, we don't register that they're causing us pain. Just as a child doesn't register 1 ton of ice cream will cause you severe abdominal pain. So we go through life thinking that our small sphere of interest is the only thing and will make us supremely happy. And the harshness of life, the toughness of life, will tell us it's not like that. We make it tough for ourselves. That's the problem. We assess it as a tough thing, not understanding that the divine grace is there, sitting there, and every event, every gap, as it were, is an opportunity for flow, just as every vacuum in water gives us an opportunity for a flow, a current of water to flow through and fill the gap. Nature does not like emptiness. Nature always finds a way to fill. One great teaching that was given to me when I was, let's say, 15 or so, was wherever there is a gap within nature, And for us, nature, God, these are synonymous terms. Every gap that you see, something good flows through it. We can use this for any event which causes us bereavement, suffering, grief. We take it as a kind of tragedy, not really understanding that in this flow that we call life, there is an origin, there's a continuation, there's a death, but there's always the same current. The eddy may change, the direction may change, but the flow is always there and never leaves. And that flow is what we call life, and that life is what we call divine grace. Divine grace flows when we elevate our minds, when we steer our attention toward the very highest values. And what are these values and what is the mechanism to access them? Love of God, intense longing, love, a personal connection, accesses the grace in a personal way with the full grace of our imagination, our imaging faculty, our creative faculty. After all, you see, if the faculty of resolve and intention as formed in a kind of visualization and rehearsal of that visualized scene creates a result for us in the material world, then surely imagining and creating for us in artistic terms the personal God that grace itself inspires and supplies us with will surely manifest that same God to us. Even more so, and it requires refining our intensity. In yoga exercise, when I used to teach it, I was always cognizant that human nature says that we will do the minimum, misunderstanding it as the maximum. Somebody puts themselves in a posture, and as a skilled teacher will know the limits of that person, will say, stretch another inch or half inch. And the person does it and is surprised, oh, I can do it. Wonderful. Now you've done the maximum. A little bit of tuning. Spiritual life, if you're static and nothing is flowing, and that happens in spiritual life from time to time, in moments like that, be assured that there is a refinement round the corner, that the next day you can make it a little bit more intense until tears can flow. This is the devotional side of it. What is the intellectual side of it? Having the skill of interpreting this world in a different way, seeing the grace flowing, throwing through all these upadis or limiting adjuncts, which are really manifesting adapters. Through all hands, through all eyes, is the scripture. And repeatedly I'm telling this. Through all hands, all eyes, all limbs. Seeing that flowing, catching that flow, gives us faith, removes all doubts, along with the flow of grace. All the debris is swept away with the current, removing all our doubt, removing all our fear, removing all our petty desires and temptations. All that gets swept away with divine grace. And we have access to it. We just have to tune our attention into it constantly. Pray constantly. Align the mind constantly. Make God your presence, your eternal companion. Practicing the presence of God. This is the one piece of literature I always give people who are interested in starting in a new direction, spiritual life, as it were, growing in spiritual life. Learn one lesson, that this manifesting element that we call God is always present to you. And if you didn't notice it, then find your pulse and ask yourself, where does this pulse come from? It physiologically comes from the heart. Well, what's beating the heart? Something called life. We don't know what it is. Call it God's grace. Call it divine grace flowing. investing life in you because it has a purpose for you. Catch it, find it out, and revel in it. Enjoy it fully. But tune your attention into it. And by tuning your attention into it, your attention elsewhere is left behind, because we can easily sit alone and commiserate. What a pity, what a pity. But sitting alone is our opportunity to assert and feel, what a glory, what a glory. Tuning the mind into the glory of the divine self, catching the wind of God's grace that is ever flowing. And that means we have the luxury of letting go. We have the luxury of surrendering, otherwise called renunciation. We have the luxury of letting go, relaxing. I'll always remember one Enneagram course that we did, and one of the participants, who I won't mention, but is sitting right here. And I said, let's do an exercise. So we all went outside and we said, we'll line up behind you, you go in the front. And now we'll catch you. You just have to fall. Your job is just falling. Our job is to catch you. Naturally, a person might say, are you sure? You know, if this is a cruel joke, I'm not buying into this. If you let me fall, no. But you see, so we, in the T position, as self-defense calls it, one person supporting one, and so on and so forth. And then the leader at the front. Yeah, just fall back and we'll catch you. Now with that experience, you now have the experience called letting go. And for many people, that is maybe the hardest discipline. Let go. Let go requires faith that you are always supported, that there will never be anything that will let you fall, no matter how things appear in a so-called difficult aspect. There is always a way around it. And we always have the assistance and help of ever-flowing grace. Having that confidence, that trust, is called faith. And faith is the opposite of fear. I often say fear, by definition, is faith in heredity, your genetic heredity, your individuality. Faith is the opposite of that. Faith is complete trust that things are going well. We oft quoted Julian of Norwich that some of you like and quote, and some of you even live near where Julian of Norwich was, I think. And all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. Now, all of this I have repeated constantly, but the subject is because we're in between these two directional positions. One is this new year, Kalpatru day, where even without Kalpatru or that understanding, everybody seems to make New Year resolutions. What's the definition of a New Year resolution? It's an unreasonable assertion that you make that will go away at least within the next 2 weeks. And next year, you do the same, and the next year the same. Well, that's not really resolve. That's not a resolution. A resolution means I'm enthusiastic about a transformation somewhere. And I know I have to form a habit. And to form a habit, I have to repeat it. This is called practice. And repeat it until it becomes habitual. If I want to get up, say, at a certain time in the morning, do it with a non-exception, 10-day, zero exception policy. And then I have a better chance of automatically waking up and getting up at that particular time. As an example. And if I want to give up a kind of addiction of some kind, it requires a counter positive addiction to take its place. That addiction in spiritual life is called yearning. It's called yearning for God. or yearning for the divine, or yearning for truth, or yearning for freedom in its true sense. All of this is necessary to mobilize this grace. So with this in mind, Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto all. And of course, typically and traditionally, we often carry these conversations on a little bit more, but I'm not sure if it's a first talk for a long time, so we might not want to do that. Unless there are any questions.
I have one question. Swami.
Yes, okay, there's a question.
About that guy, that Englishman, God rest him,
yes.
Plato or whatever,
yeah.
about the original sin.
Yeah.
And he was saying original sin just wasn't plausible. Is that what did he say instead of that?
He said that we have free will.
Yeah.
That we're not bound to any predecessor's conditions. We're not born.
The example of
we're not born in the negativity.
Yeah.
We're born with the possibility.
Yeah.
And as I say, if we had to maybe have some kind of motto here or vision here, I might say infinite possibilities.
Right. So original sin is kind of grabbed hold of by the Catholic Church for one thing, and we're told we're sinners, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that explains, where did it come from?
It comes from the early Augustine principally, to say that it was to emphasize the need for penance. Now, penance we might interpret properly as a need for discipline. Mm. Now, if you align that with a certain theology that says there is a Christ, and that Christ died for your sins, and that Christ is the Lamb that takes away your sins, just as in the Jewish tradition, the lamb was offered at Passover, for example. You see, when Jesus went into the temple and drove out the money changers, these are not just a few stalls. They weren't a few stalls laid out on a Sunday at a market. No, there was serious business going on because you had to offer a lamb. And the lamb, the inference of the lamb was going back. You could say that Abraham offering his son Isaac and a human sacrifice and so on. No, you put a lamb instead. You put all your sins on the lamb and the lamb gets slaughtered. That's the idea about it. Or you take your most precious possession, that's the other understanding of it, and give it. And of course, the commerce around the table said, your lamb is inferior. I can sell you a much superior brand. And so this commercial thing was going on in the name of holy sacrifice and so on. Yes, and Jesus objected to that, you see, because it was there orientated toward, greed. You can put it like that.
So it's very refreshing to know that we're not carrying original sin on our back,
Absolutely, and this goes. I point out at various talks, interfaith talks, that this carries right through in our culture. So when you go to a doctor, the expectation is you are sick and you have to be made well. Not yet you are well, and there are obstacles in the way. And so if that's a different way of thinking. So what will we do? We have to remove the obstacles. And the obstacles are caused by going against the natural grain of things. That is stress, maybe wrong diet, maybe lack of exercise, maybe lack of elimination, maybe one or more, or all of these, Buchanan's language. And so it's more a question of removing the obstacles rather than correcting a condition, which is a malfunction. Same thing with psychology.
Glass half full and a glass half empty.
Yeah, no, we say it's always full and overflowing. Fullness and freedom and perfection. This is the one message of Vedanta that no other system has, which says that it goes directly to the heart of things and says, You are seeking freedom, you're already free. You're seeking perfection, you're already perfect. That's why Jesus says, "Blessed, be perfect as your Father in heaven." It's not an impossible thing. No, you are that already, because the kingdom of heaven, where the king is already in you. You don't have to peep out of the window, when is it coming?
And he also said, "Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven," or something.
Yes, yes. And the Psalms are all full of this positive glory as well. So this is the aspect. We acknowledge we are already full and free, nothing to accomplish, but everything to express. And so what is worship and prayer? It becomes an expression, not something to get. The expression of the glory that is already here.
I'm begging, yeah.
That's the highest form of, and that comes out as thankfulness, gratitude. All right, well, I think we'll leave it at that. So thank you. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.